See, I remembered the song.
I'm Muhammad, I'm a prophet because I said so. I have this hairy mole right on my shoulder, you know. And my bestest buddy Allah, he works for me though. I call him God to make you think I'm pure as white snow. In the damp cave of Hira, I met this bad man. He squeezed me until I threw up the Quran. When I ran to Khadija in anguish and fears, she explained, "This is Jibril," and wiped off my tears. I'm Muhammad, I'm a prophet because I am him, and Allah caters to my needs and every whim. His reward is that I let people think he is Lord. Then he lets me torment the people when I get bored. Now the world must revert and become just like me, and never ask questions and never be free. You'll become dumb blind Muslims and do as you're told, or your heads will be rolling your family's soul. Oh, Aisha, ooh la la, what a pretty dress. May I wear it? Your dresses get those revelations rolling. No, don't touch my eye makeup. Mine is too young for makeup. I'm 54 after all. My religion, Islam, grew like fungi on bread due to people's reluctance to part with their head. And because I got rid of the people who think Allah's slaves can be duped to do things that sure stink. I'm Muhammad, I'm a prophet because I said it. I meet up with Jibreel when I'm in need of you. And my bestest buddy Allah delivers on time. These girls and boys and slaves and all these riches of mine. I'm Muhammad, I'm a prophet because I told you. My brothel in the sky awaits if you say it's true. But if Allah will find out in the mosque you did fart, He'll dump you in the hellfire when you depart. He'll dump you in the hellfire when you depart. Oh, Aisha, I still feel the pain after the food I ate in Khaybar. Allah is cutting my aorta.
Allah is a false god, a false god, a false god. Allah is a false god, a false god. Allah is a false god, a false god, a false god. Allah is a false god, a false god. And Muhammad is not a prophet. Muhammad is not a prophet. If you want grace and mercy and love, Islam is not for you. But Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. Jesus is the King of Kings who died to save us all. If you just repent and believe He took your sins on the cross, then mercy and grace, forgiveness and love, eternity can be yours.
Hallelujah. Let Lord Jesus Christ shine forth. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are joining us.
That's not an ending.
You said you were going to put song together for us, but
mercy and love and grace and truth, eternity can be yours. And Allah is a false god. You have to bring it back home. It's not. It's way out there. What is it called? It's diminished chord that is unresolved, I think. But anyway, you can just hear it, that it's not done yet. I'll be glad to re-record it.
I remember
to Ealing.
I remember you said that last week, and
yes, Just say the
Something.
word.
Do something.
Allah is a false God, a false God, a false God. And mercy and love and grace and truth, eternity can be yours. For Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. Jesus is the way to truth. Get on the train on board. And whatever. But you got to bring it back to the tonic. Something is missing there. Anyway, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to our show.
Are you gonna put the song together by next week?
Sure.
Someone sent me an email. In your weekly Jihad Watch live streams, you start with poem.
Yes.
Bring verse like this. People are saying maybe we need to bring song like this from Robert Spencer now.
That's a great idea. We'll have a song fest. Allah's Song Fest.
Sure.
What do they call those things? The benefit concerts, Live Aid and Farm Aid. So we'll have Allah Aid.
Fundraising for Allah or something.
I think he's got plenty of money. That's the problem. He's a false god, He is a false god. It's true.
Not only you've got like over 30 books you have written, and now you've got accent as well. You've got singing skills as well.
I've only written 30, not 31. Actually, I have. No, that's not true. I'm sorry, because I ghost wrote a few books, but I can't reveal that. I mean, I can reveal that I did it. I can't reveal whose books they were. But yes, there are more than 30 books that I've written that are out there. You're right. And Allah is still a false god.
So even though you wrote lots of books, that doesn't change the fact that Allah is false god and Muhammad is false prophet.
You can't make him true just by writing about it. Tell that to Yasser Caddy.
So last time, hello everyone, thank you for joining us. We've been doing series of Quran, going through the Quranic verses, which was put together originally God knows whom, but this century it was put together as the critical Quran by Robert Spencer. So we are going through verse by verse. He's unpacking for us, and last week we entered Surah 4. That's the chapter of woman where we get to see Allah's love and his concerns towards woman and how he honors woman. And we will pick up from verse 5. If you, those of you who are in the chat, if you want to get my attention, please put @ in front of DCCI Ministries, and then I'll pick up your comments and questions. Before I kind of share the screen for the Quran, anything you want us to remember from last week, or anything you want to bring into our attention, Robert?
Not in particular. I think that it's important to remember that the chapter of women does not honor women, that the chapters, once again, are named in a completely arbitrary fashion, and many of them are quite negative, as in the hypocrites and so on. And so it has nothing to do with honoring women, and the Islamic apologists lie when they say that. As they lie on so many things.
You are just breaking my heart. You had opportunity to fix the Quran.
Yes, right.
And you didn't fix the part where it is about woman.
You're right. I could have edited it. I could have made it such a nicer book. But then they would have said, that's not in the Quran. The Quran says, kill them wherever you find them. It doesn't say give them a hug. You have falsified the words of Allah. I didn't want that.
Okay, so
I had to tell it straight.
For your own dignity, you had to stick with the text.
That's it.
Okay. Chapter 4, verse 5. Do not give foolish people your property, which Allah has made a means of support for you, but feed and clothe them from it, and speak kindly to them.
Note the context. They always say you're taking it out of context, so let's put it in context, shall we? Look, verse 4, and give to the women a free gift of their marriage portions, etc. Do not give foolish people your property. Who are the foolish people? Test orphans until they reach marriageable age in verse 6. So you've got 2 verses about marriage, and then in between, do not give foolish people your property. Not only that, but verse 4 was about dowries and giving goods to the women in exchange for the marriage. So the foolish people are the women.
That's very kind of you to remind us that. I just want to, this is not racism or personal attack or hate speech, Robert. I just want you to remember, just for how long? Let me see. For next 50 minutes. I am woman, okay?
It's Allah's word. It's Allah who said it. It's not me. It's Allah.
Test orphans until they reach the marriageable age. Then, if you find them of sound judgment, give them their fortune, and do not devour by squandering it quickly before they grow up. Whoever is rich.
Notice something there. Test orphans until they reach marriageable age. Now, there are some Islamic apologists in the West who say this means, see, it's clear that you can't marry children because the Quran talks about marriageable age, but it doesn't actually say what the marriageable age is. And then look, do not devour it by squandering it quickly before they grow up. So the marriageable age comes before they grow up. You see, because so you're already spending their dowry that you gave them. You're spending what you gave them, and you're doing it. You shouldn't do it before they grow up, but you can marry them before they grow up, or you wouldn't have it to spend.
So these orphans are kids. Still, they are kids.
Yes.
So what is the test orphans until they reach? What is that testing them means?
Well, probably you're checking to see if they're virgins. That's likely the most important test.
So they figure out if they are, yeah, okay.
Yes.
Very nice of Allah. He is very considerable over there.
Very.
Whoever is rich, let him abstain generously, and whoever is poor, let him take a reasonable portion of it. And when you give orphans their fortune, have it witness in their presence. Allah is sufficient as a reckoner. To the man belong a share of what parents and close relatives leave behind, and to the woman a share of what parents and close relatives leave behind, whether it is little or much, a legal share.
Now notice here again, we were talking about marriage, were we not? And yet now suddenly to the men belong a share of what parents and close relatives leave behind. So we were talking about marriage a minute ago, and now we're talking about inheritance. And there was no transition. There was no announcement. There was no explanation. It just suddenly, it's clear they're talking about inheritance. And so this, yet again, is another indication that this is a book that was stuck together from many parts. Because if you really believe that Muhammad is one man who wrote this, he must have been the most careless and inattentive writer in the history of the world, because he constantly flits from subject to subject without any explanation and any warning. And this is an example of that.
Well, that will be your fault because you didn't teach them to write better. Not everyone can write like you.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good thing.
And when relatives and orphans and the needy are present at the division, give to them from it and speak kindly to them. And let those have the same fear as they would if they were left behind them with offspring and were afraid of them. So let them be mindful of their duties to Allah and speak justly. Indeed, those who devour the wealth of orphans wrongfully, they just swallow fire into their bellies, and they will roast in flame. Allah gives you a responsibility concerning your children. To the male, the equivalent of the portion of 2 females, and if they are more than 2 women, their share is 2/3 of the inheritance. And if there be one, then half. and to each of his parents 1/6 of the inheritance. If he has a son, and if the son has no son and his parents are his heirs, then his mother receives 1/3. And if he has a brother, then his mother receives 1/6. After any legacy he may have bequeathed or debt. Your parents and your children, you do not know which of them is near to you in usefulness. It is an injunction from Allah. Indeed, Allah is the knower, the wise.
Okay, so look, you have the math doesn't add up. That's one thing. But the other thing is, to the male, the equivalent of the proportion of 2 females. So in verse 7, it looks as if you're going to get equality, because verse 7 said, to the men belong a share of what parents and close relatives leave behind, and to the women a share of what parents and close relatives leave behind. But then in 11, it says that the male heir gets a share equivalent to the share of 2 of his sisters. And then it becomes very difficult to follow, because if there are more than 2 sisters, then they get 2/3 of it, apparently all of them together. So they would get 2/3 divided by 3 or more, and the male would only get the 1/3, but he would still come out with a larger share than any of their individual shares. And then the parents have to be factored in. And anyway, it becomes virtually impossible to make this work out so that everybody gets an equal. Well, actually, it's obvious that the objective is not to give everyone an equal share, but to value the males more highly, as the Quran always does.
Yeah. So okay, we've got God of Islam having problem with basic maths, and also affecting putting the difference between value of man and woman. Wouldn't you kind of like Muslim would simply say, well, that makes sense because woman will be married to husband will be taking care of the woman, so that woman doesn't need equal share. What would you say to that?
The problem is no distinction is made between a woman who's married and a woman who's not.
Yeah.
And so that is an explanation that is imposed upon the Quran and is clearly not in the text itself. And so once again, as is so often the case, when Muslims say that, they are making the Quran not as bad as it actually is. And they themselves are showing that they are aware of how bad this looks, and they're trying to make it better. And so they are better than the Quran. And what does that tell them? That they were that doesn't tell them. But what it tells us is that they were created by the real God, who is better than the God of the Quran. And consequently, the God of the Quran, his followers are better than he is, because they were created by the true God, and the Quran is a false or demonic entity.
Yeah. Not very helpful for the followers of Islam, though. Phil, no. You might be bad at maths. Doesn't matter. Like, we are good or bad. We are good with numbers or bad with numbers. But if you are God of Islam, you better be good with numbers, because like you are the God Almighty supposed to be.
Yeah, one would think it would all make sense that these instructions coming from the supreme God of the universe would be completely clear. But yes, it's like that. A half plus 2/3 plus a 1/6. And there you go. It doesn't make any sense. And you would think that Allah could figure out a better way to explain it.
Verse 12. And to you belongs the half of what your wives leave behind. If they have no children, if they have no children, but if they have a child, then you receive 1/4 of what they leave behind.
Okay, did you notice the contradiction?
Children and child?
No, the parents. That this in verse 12, you're a parent, and you can get 1/4 of what the child leaves behind. Am I reading that right?
To you belongs
if they have a child,
your wives.
Oh, if they have a child, then you receive 1/4 of what they leave behind. So they're envisioning that the child has died before the parents. Is that right? I could be wrong on this. I haven't worked this out previously, but
And to you
you see
belongs the
what it
half of.
says,
So you are taking half of what your wife has, and
right? And if you have
if
a child,
if you have no children, but if they have a child,
which is you, because to you belongs half of what your wives leave behind. So
yeah,
your wives have died and you're still here, and you get half of what they had, right?
yeah, and then you get whatever the child is gonna have.
So the child is presumably dead, and you are inheriting a fourth of what the child possessed, correct?
Yeah, so child is gonna
But
die before.
right. So we're clear on this, right?
That's
So
what
verse
I'm.
11,
Yeah,
right above verse 11 said the parents get a sixth, and now the parents get a fourth.
maybe these parents like depend whether you are mom or dad.
Well, it says each of his parents a sixth of the inheritance in verse 11.
Well,
You
can we
see,
get some?
you have it. It's a little bit above where you have it highlighted. See, each
Yeah,
of
yeah.
his parents a sixth of the inheritance. So
Don't
the parents
probably.
get a sixth in verse 11, but a fourth in verse 12. So if they keep going, they might end up getting even less. I don't know.
I don't know. Clearly, someone is trying to get someone's money, and Allah is not doing very good calculation.
Indeed.
People, when you are writing your wills, please make sure you calculate it right. You don't want having like live streams about your wills that people couldn't figure out. And to them belong the fourth of what you leave if you have no child. But if you have a child, then an eighth of what you leave after any legacy you may have bequeathed or dead. And if a man or woman is kalala and has a brother or sister, then each of them receives a sixth.
Kalala, according to Tuberty, there are 3 different definitions of it because nobody knows what the word means. And that's why I didn't leave it. I didn't translate it as it's ordinarily translated because there's no agreement as to whether it refers to the person who has died or the heirs of the person who has died. And so the instructions here become completely incoherent because we don't even know if the man or the woman is the one who has died or the one who's inheriting.
Oh, that's important detail to kind of get mixed up, doesn't it?
But that's the disagreement, according to Tuberty, not according to Spencer the Islamophobe, but according to Tuberty, one of the foremost tafsir, one of the foremost of the commentaries on the Quran written by At-Tabari, it is unclear what this word means. And there are 3 primary definitions that he offers. And Ibn Kathir, he says there's no agreement on this either. And he quotes Abu Bakr saying, I will say my own opinion about it. That is that he doesn't even know what the word means. And if it is correct, then this correctness is from Allah. But if my opinion is wrong, it will be my error. And because of shaitan, he says Kalala refers to the man who has neither descendants nor antecedents, descendants. So Abu Bakr says it means somebody who doesn't have anybody to inherit when he dies.
Whatever the meaning of the word is, kind of leaves me thinking, while Quran states again and again, it is well detailed, well explained, clear book, yet early Muslims as well as Muslim scholars are trying to figure out what this word might mean.
Mm-hmm.
And
so,
it has a lot to do with like daily life because people die quite often. And you want to know if I want to know if I'm going to get any money or not when my husband dies or my family members dies.
It's a clear book. It ought to be telling you exactly what you can expect in such a situation. Yeah. And instead, there's all this confusion.
Okay, so I'll let people to go and figure out Allah's maths, and then help him a little bit with maths regarding all these, like who is getting what. Verse 13. These are the limits of Allah. Whoever obeys Allah and His Messenger, He will make him enter gardens with under which river flows, where they will dwell forever. That will be the great success. And whoever disobey Allah and His Messenger and transgresses His limits, He will make him enter fire, where he will dwell forever. He will be a shameful doom. So loving. As for those of your women who are guilty of lewdness, call to witness 4 of you against them. And if they testify, then confine them to their houses until death takes them, or Allah finds another way for them. Wow.
Okay. Now here,
So,
this also is a word that is a little bit controverted as to what exactly constitutes lewdness. It's most commonly understood as adultery, but also homosexual activity. And as per chapter 24, which of course we're a long way from, it's 4 witnesses are required to establish it. But if they are found guilty on that basis, oh, well, the 4 witnesses are here also, I should note, but not explained. And if you have that standard met, then you confine them to their homes. But if Allah finds another way for them, then there is another penalty that is possible. And many of the Muslim scholars say that this penalty has been abrogated, and it refers to the traditions that call for death by stoning. But that does not appear in the Quran. And Islamic scholars will tell you that hadiths never override Quran. But here is hadith overriding Quran because the stoning is not in the Quran. And the verse says, confine them to their homes. So the stoning is justified on the basis of Allah finding another way. That's explained, supposedly justifies that you have a different penalty. And then, of course, there's the famous hadith in which the Caliph Umar says, I have it right here, I am afraid that after a long time has passed, people may say, we do not find the verses of the Rajam, stoning to death, in the holy book, and consequently they may go astray by leaving an obligation that Allah has revealed. And so Umar says, I confirm that the penalty of Rajam, of stoning, be inflicted on him who commits illegal sexual intercourse if he is already married and the crime is proved by witnesses or pregnancy or confession. And then he explains that Muhammad did it. Muhammad stoned people, and therefore this is something that people should not think they shouldn't do just because it's not in the Quran. And yet the fact that this is taken for granted and that Sharia states to this day practice stoning, it contradicts Islamic theology, because Islamic theology is that hadith never overrides Quran. And yet there's no, whatever Umar says in a hadith, therefore, can't even override Quran itself, even when he's saying this means you have to carry out stoning, even though it's not in the Quran.
So I'm very much aware that's what Muslims are saying, but in their practical life, hadith always is overriding the Quran.
Yeah,
That's what we get to see. So, practical question of these 4 witnesses.
yes.
So people should be watching you, let's say if it is like adultery or something, 4 people are simply watching you as it is happening so that they can come and testify, right?
Yeah, you have to do it out in the open so that everybody can see. And this will ensure that you can be properly punished. It's an absurd standard, and it's even an absurd standard by the lights of Muhammad himself. Muhammad set the standard according to the story in the Sirah literature because he did not want Aisha to be stoned to death when she was accused. And so this is very important, that he's setting a standard that he knows they can't meet. And yet that then becomes the standard for all of Islamic law. and yet it's a ridiculous standard because people committing adultery or homosexual activity or whatever else that this covers are not going to be doing this in front of people. And so it's unattainable. And yet people are punished for adultery in places like Afghanistan and Iran. And somehow they have met the standard for the witnesses, or else, in many cases, unfortunately, it's a case of rape. And when the woman accuses the man of rape, this is considered to be a confession.
And when you on the rape case, it's actually very sad because it's very sad for women because witnesses should be seeing the act like how it is kind of taking place stuff. Without
Yes.
that, woman's kind of argument or case is just nothing.
Yes. She's actually, according to Islamic law, a woman is not eligible to testify in a zina case, in a case
Yeah.
of unlawful sexual intercourse. So she can accuse, and that could be considered to be incriminating, self-incriminating, but it's of no value against any man she might be accusing.
I'm just gonna respond to this because Nadir Ahmed looks like your good friend. I don't know why you are friend with these people, Robert.
Nadir, my old friend, how are you? You're still with the ridiculous claims. You don't have no idea. You look so silly. You make Allah look even sillier than he is already. You have no idea, my friend. You really should try to find another line of work, pumping gas or something. But the idea that people are afraid of you to debate you.
Do you want him to do work in gas station? There will be lots of
No.
like booming. There is lots of explosion
Yes.
stuff happening.
That's true.
I'm not running from anyone. I did ask you, Nadir Ahmed, get in touch with me once you become younger and when your memory gets better. Remember, you told me you are old, you can't remember things. So I'm expecting like once you go back to your 20s or something, get in touch with me and then we can deal with that. He told me he's old.
Oh, sorry, go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't hear. Excuse me. Apologies.
He was telling me he's old. He cannot remember things.
Well, I don't know if he ever could. I remember
he can if he gets younger.
Back in 2013, I think it was, I debated him, and he had a black beard, and now his beard is white, gone white with the shock of so many debate defeats he's suffered. But anyway, he's a funny guy.
Once I see him, he's like in his early 20s, then yeah, that will give the impression, yeah, he's younger.
Well, you know, the jihadis, they dye their beards black to show they're youthful and ready for jihad. So if Nadir comes out with a black beard again, then we know to watch out. The consequences.
It's like facelifting, all those kind of things.
Yes.
Anyway, seriously, focus. Let's focus on the word of Allah. And as for the two of you who are guilty of it, punish them both. And if they repent and improve, then let them be. Indeed, Allah is ever relenting, merciful. Forgiveness is only incumbent on Allah towards those who do evil in ignorance. Then turn quickly to Allah. Though these are the ones towards whom Allah is merciful. Allah is always the knower and wise.
Mm-hmm.
Forgiveness is not for those who do evil deeds until when death comes upon them. It's very sad. Like he says, indeed, I repent now and yet for those who die while they are unbelievers. For such people, we have prepared a painful doom. O you who believe, it is not lawful for you forcibly to inherit woman. Topic changed. Now, yes. should you put constraint upon them so that you might take away part of what you have given them, unless they will be guilty of flagrantness. But consent with them in kindness. For if you hate them, it may be that you hate something in which Allah has placed much good.
Now notice that it's going back and forth from law regarding marriage And then you could say related is law regarding adultery and so on. But then it's also talking about inheritance. And it goes from one to the other and then back again. And so what may have happened is that you had a document that was written on one side. And of course, this was the days when documents had to be all written by hand. They weren't printed, and paper was not plentiful like it is today. And so many things were reused. It may be that on one side you had the inheritance, and on the other side you had marriage law. And that was all put together as if it was one straight argument, one straight narrative. And so it goes from one page on marriage to the next page on inheritance to the next page on marriage to the next page on inheritance. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's just this is all guesswork on the part of the scholars of the Quran, but you can understand how they would get this idea because it keeps going back and forth between these two different topics, and that suggests that two different documents were somehow ineptly put together.
Such a sad, like God, who's supposed to be all-knowing and prepared His eternal word for long time, couldn't even follow the structure or follow
if this were somebody's book today and it were submitted to a publisher, the publisher would give it to an editor, and in chapter 4 right here that we're talking about now, he would take the parts about inheritance and put them in one section and maybe even head it inheritance, and then the next section marriage, and put all the material about marriage together. And so that would be much clearer and easier to understand than this, which goes back and forth between the two.
Yeah. And if you wish to exchange one wife for another,
notice how it's like saying if you wish to exchange one shirt for another, it's just something you own. This is not an equal human being. You're not talking about marriage remotely like Christian marriage. You're talking about having a commodity, and you change one for another, like saying, I don't like this lamp, I'm going to get a new one.
Well, I recently looked at one of the video Muslim missionaries are doing. It's exactly the same mindset. Yeah, I didn't like this, I want to exchange. If you wish to exchange one wife for another, and you have given a sum of money to one of them, do not take anything from it. Would you take it by means of calumny and open wrong? How can you take it after one of you has gone into the other, and they have taken a strong pledge from you? And do not marry those women whom your fathers married, except what has already happened in the past. Indeed, it was always lewdness and abomination and evil way.
So lewdness a little while ago would get you punished by being closed up in your house forever. But that was only for women, notice. And here he's saying, don't do this because it's lewdness. But if you did it before, no problem. That's for the men, though.
Not only you. No command. It just forbidden to you are your mothers and your daughters and your sisters and your fathers and your sisters and your mother's sisters and your brother's daughter and your sister's daughter and your foster mothers and your foster sisters and your mother-in-law and your stepdaughters who are under your protection, of your woman to whom you have gone in. But if you have not gone into them, then it is no sin for you. And the wives of your sons from your own loins, and that you should have two sisters together, except what has already happened in the past. Indeed, Allah is ever forgiving and merciful.
So don't marry these various women. Okay, all these relatives. Very well, but go on.
Just a practical question. If I remember correctly, according to Islamic tradition, your father can marry his his stepdaughter. You've got like Islamic traditions talking about his stepdaughter because daughter is like from someone else.
Yes. That
Okay.
notice that's only stepdaughters who are under your protection is listed as forbidden.
Yeah.
So if they grow up and they're not living with you, sure, you can marry them, no problem.
Another beautiful verse. I'm just like
Yeah.
so into converting Islam right now.
And it
And
gets worse.
all married women except those whom your right hand possess. It is a declare of Allah for you. Lawful to you all, lawful to you are all beyond those mentioned, so that you may seek them in your wealth in honest wedlock, not
Debauchery. So
debauchery. And
so those who married women, you can't marry married women unless they're your slaves. And so Sunni Islamic law says when a married woman is taken captive, her marriage is immediately annulled. That is, she's not married anymore, because the Quran, of course, allows for a Muslim man to take a non-Muslim woman. And this is one of the other verses. We talked about it last time, and this is another one of the verses that justify the mass rapes that we saw in Britain, as well as in Sweden, Italy, Germany, and elsewhere. And they are done by Muslim migrants who know these passages and understand that Allah has allowed for this.
am I right to remember we do have Islamic traditions even talking about there were married women who were taken as slaves. Muslim men went into them in front of their husbands, that Muhammad give permission for them to do so.
Yeah, and that's designed to humiliate both the women and the husbands, because humiliating the unbelievers is very important. They have to feel themselves subdued, according to chapter 9, verse 29. And so to make them miserable is a divine command, a command from the God of Islam. And so, yes, that's completely acceptable and to be celebrated. This is what makes for the great Islamic heroes.
Yeah, so like hero action. That's very hero action.
Yes.
And those whom you enjoy, give them their shares as a duty. And there is no sin for you in what you do by mutual agreement after the duty. Indeed, Allah is ever knower and wise.
Now, it's interesting to note that there's no, what does it say? There's no
There's
sin for you in what you do by mutual agreement after the duty. That is the basis by which the Shia and also Sunnis who agree on this, some of them, that you can have temporary marriage, that you do your duty to the woman, which is that you pay her some amount of money, and then you can have sexual relations with her by mutual agreement after you have done this duty. And then it's a temporary thing that ends at a certain point. But this is the verse that the Shia point to justify that.
So under the Shia circle, it is known as muta marriage, if I remember correctly.
Yes,
In
pleasure
Sunnah
marriage.
circle, yeah, in Sunnah circle, it is misyar and lots of other names as well. So
Yes.
as long as you are paying the woman for the pleasure you receive from her, and you kind of say, "Oh, this marriage is only for 3 hours," and then it's over.
There you go.
Well, same God who was just talking about exchanging the wives wouldn't have any problem for 3 hours of sex.
Of course. Well, everything, remember, as we have discussed last time in particular, everything is for the men. And so there's really nothing that a man wants to do that's forbidden under
In
certain circumstances.
I don't know if you watched. There was a BBC documentary a while back in Iraq. So muta marriage is like so common.
Mhm.
People, women don't even know they end up in muta marriage because like they get married on the phone by the imam.
If you
And
get married on the phone, you really should know everything is not going to be normal. But all right.
there is nothing normal in Islam when it comes to
Yes,
marriage and anything else. So
indeed.
in the wedding thing, like they don't need to use the word muta. Like they're just like kind of getting married, and then
Mhm.
she finds out like, oh, it was muta marriage, like after he leaves her for another woman.
Mhm.
So you don't even need to know like your marriage is only like
Yeah,
2
there's
hours.
no anything, like I say, anything a man wants to do,
Yeah,
there's no
Allah
problem.
justify for it.
And you can say, "Oh no," because it says mutual agreement. That doesn't mean mutual agreement. It has to be that she's aware of every aspect of it. It's just mutual agreement that she accepts this amount of money for the marriage, the dowry.
Yeah. And whoever is not able to afford the marry fee, believing woman, let them marry from the believing woman whom your right hand possess. Allah knows best about your faith. You are from one another, so marry them by permission of their people and give them their shares in kindness. They
Now
bring
remember, the people the women your right hands possess are slaves. And so the permission of their people, slaves don't really, that's the whole definition of a slave, that they don't give consent. As a matter of fact, when I did one of the debates I did with our friend Nadir Ahmed was about slavery, and he kept insisting that the slave women had to consent to sexual relations with the slave owners. And that's just ridiculous. That's not what a slave is. The very definition of a slave is that you can be ordered to do things and you don't have to consent. So it's this permission of their people is just pro forma, because slaves don't. There's no permission that's given there. I mean,
or they are not even being asked.
indeed.
Just a quick clarification. This is not a personal attack. He's your friend, your old friend. He's not my friend. People who email pretend to be someone else, and then after when they by mistake when they send you email from their own email address, and then they say, "Oh, I am old. I can't remember things." They are intentional deceivers. Not my
Yes,
friend. He's not
he's
my friend. He's your friend.
he's not really even my friend. Of course, he would say that neither of us are or could be his friends because the Quran forbids him from taking Christians to be his friends.
Where did I left? And if when they are honorably married, they commit newness, they will incur half of the punishment for free woman. This is for him among you who fears to commit sin, but to have patience would be better for you. Allah is forgiving and merciful. Allah
So
would
half the punishment for free women, you only get stoned, half stoned.
Is that like you get half stoned, or is that like, let's say, you are just about to die, but they leave you before you die?
Yeah, presumably. I mean, it's another incoherent thing that if you get half the punishment of free women, well, we heard earlier that the punishment for free women, according to the Quran, was keep them walled up in the house till they die. So what do you keep them walled up into the house for half the time? How do you know when they're going to die? It doesn't make any sense. Or if you're going to stone them to death, as per the Hadith, then you stone them until they're half dead. And so here again, you have this book doesn't make any sense.
It could be maybe like, let's say if they are stoning with like 200 gram stone, so that's going to be like 100 gram stone.
Yes.
And regarding like keep them in the houses until they die, because they wouldn't know when they are going to die unless Allah kind of gives them the revelation for the date and the time. Probably they do like half day, and then they hope that they die like half day out, half day in, and then they hope they die end of the day so that they are not owning anything to Allah for the following day.
That's a great idea. Yeah. You wall them up in the house from midnight to noon, and then you
Yeah.
let them out.
Yeah, because like you don't want to be disobedient to Allah. If it says half, then half it is.
You were the great imam.
Yep. And of course, it finishes with as Allah is forgiving and merciful. This is how He shows His mercy. Allah would explain to you and guide you by the examples of those who were before you and would turn to you in mercy. Allah is the knower and the wise. And Allah would turn to you in mercy. But those who follow in vain desires would have you go tremendously astray. Allah would make the burden light for you. For man was created weak. O you who believe, do not squander your wealth among yourselves in vanity, except in the trade by mutual consent, and do not kill yourself. Indeed, Allah is always merciful to you.
Okay. Do not kill yourselves. It's important to note that this is contradicted in chapter 9, verse 111, which promises paradise to those who kill and are killed for Allah.
Well, I disagree with that.
Yes.
In a sense. They are like, because they are in the intention of killing others, it doesn't count as like killing yourself.
Exactly. That's the justification that's given for it. They're not trying to kill themselves. They're just trying to kill a lot of unbelievers by strapping bombs on themselves so that they're blown to bits. But it was still not their intention.
Yeah. Like they still love like all the things they do in this world. They just want to get the Islamic paradise. It's better. So therefore, they are simply they're not killing themselves, but they are simply sacrificing themselves.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Whoever does that through aggression and injustice, we will cast him into the fire, and that is always easy for Allah. If you avoid the serious things that are forbidden to you, we will forgive your evil deeds and make you enter at a noble gate.
Okay, so what are the serious things that are forbidden to you? In the 14th century, there was a cleric, a hafiz, the and he lists 70 major sins. And the first one, of course, is shirk, associating partners with Allah. But also black magic, adultery, desertion on the battlefield, alcohol, lying, stealing, pride, misappropriating the spoils of war, spying on others, harming Muslims, speaking ill of Muslims, disobeying one's husband, making pictures. So those are some of the serious sins.
Making pictures is in the list?
Yes.
Wow. Speaking ill of Muslims in the list as well. Yes. They are very, very serious sins, like very, very serious sins. And it was strange, like murdering people weren't in your list.
Another list has eating pork, dancing, apostasy, drug use, and playing chess.
Playing chess is the sin that Allah is dancing.
Yes.
It just reminds you, when Israel is getting out of Egypt, they are singing and dancing.
Mm-hmm.
Versus God of Islam just doesn't like joy at all.
That's right. That's a very important point. There's, as the Ayatollah Khomeini said, there's no fun in Islam, there's no joy in Islam, there's no humor in Islam.
Yeah.
No
and
chess.
There is no chess in Islam. That's why it makes sense like this. Iranian chess players don't want to go back to Iran after they entered Europe for the competitions.
Yes.
And do not covet the thing in which Allah has made some of you excel other. To man a fortune from what they have earned, and to a woman fortune from what they have earned. But ask Allah for His bounty. Indeed, Allah is ever the knower of all things. And to each person we have established heirs of what parents and close relatives leave behind.
So here again, we weren't talking about inheritance. We were talking about being just and avoiding sin. And suddenly we're back to inheritance yet again. So the page was flipped and we got back to the inheritance side.
Bad writing skills.
Very bad.
And to each person we have established heirs of what parents and close relatives leave behind. And as for those whom your right hand have made a covenant, give them their due. Indeed, Allah is ever the witness over all things. Men are in charge of women because Allah has made the one superior to other. And because
Allah
they
has made the one superior to the other. This verse is very much obscured in most translations of the Quran. And so I helped Allah out and made it clear in this one that it says, if you look at other translations, it says things like Allah has made the one excel, and that doesn't, it's not clear that what it's saying in the original. It's very clear Allah has made men superior to women. And so this contradicts the claims of Islamic apologists that we started out with in the beginning of chapter 4, that because he created male and female from a single cell, that they are equal. This is not what the Quran teaches. The Quran teaches right here that men are superior to women.
Men are, thank you for fixing it. Men are in charge of women because Allah has made the one superior to the other, and because they spend of their property. So, good women are obedient, guarding in secret what Allah has guarded. As for those whom you fear disobedience, give them a warning and banish them to separate beds and beat them. And if they obey you, do not seek any ways against them. Indeed, Allah is always high, exalted, and great.
Yeah, I think he is high, but in any case, and beat them. Beat them, and this is very important because this is another one of the parts of the Quran that is almost completely obscured today. That beating women is commanded by Allah. And there was a very famous translation back in 2007 by Lala Bakhtiar, The Sublime Quran, where she translates it, "Go away from them," which would mean that it says, give them a warning, banish them to separate beds, and go away from them. But the passage, the word that is used here means beat, and is translated as beat. Well, I actually have it here in the footnote to the Critical Quran. Pickthall, that's a famous translation into English of the Quran, and scourge them, which is beat. Yusuf Ali, and beat them lightly, but of course the lightly is not in the Arabic. Al-Halali and Khan, and last, beat them lightly if it is useful. Once again, the beat them is in the Arabic, but not the lightly. But you notice they all say beat. None of them say go away from them, like Bakhtiar does. Shakir, and beat them. Sher Ali, and chastise them, which is beat them. Khalifa, that you may, as a last alternative, beat them. And Khalifa was killed for his translation of the Quran, but in any case, it doesn't say as a last alternative in the Arabic. It just says beat them. Arbery, beat them. Rodwell, scourge them. Sale, chastise them. Assad, beat them. The Study Quran, strike them. Sahih International, strike them lightly. Now, so some of them say lightly, but the lightly is very clearly not in the Arabic. None of them say go away from them, which is what Bakhtiar says. And Bakhtiar got all kinds of publicity in 2007. And people were saying, at last, she's given us what the real meaning is. It's not beat, it's just leave them. But that's not what the word says. The word is very clear, and the translators of the Quran have a consensus, ijma, about it, that it says beat women, and they do.
You told me that you fixed the verse.
Yes.
You didn't fix the verse. Still, woman is getting beaten.
I meant that I've
You
offered a
just fixed quarter of one sentence.
I offered a clear translation, and that's what I offered in the rest of it too.
But you
That
said you fixed the part where Allah has made one superior to over other. So that's
right,
only quarter of the sentence. You didn't fix the rest of the verse.
right.
Fixing is like, no to violence. Husband, love your wives as Christ loved the church.
No, that's not in
That's
here.
fixing. One of the things I find very disturbing in this verse is the part it says, when you fear, woman doesn't even need to do anything yet. But Allah is giving right to husband when husband fear that something might happen. Therefore, husband has all the right to beat the woman. And as it's been expressed, it's not like light the beating, because Islamic tradition talks about how woman's skin was greener than her dress. Mother of the believer says she never seen any woman as suffering as the believing woman. She's looking at all the Jahiliyyah time. She's looking at Muslim woman, and she says, I never seen any woman suffering as much as the believing woman. Very disturbing. But we can't do much about it. It is the word of Allah. This is Allah's divine will. Allah wants Muslims to practice it.
Yes.
I'm very concerned for the well-being of Muslim women in here.
Well, of course, it's. I mean, this is a really a terrible document, and we can't minimize that. It's very clear that this is a document that justifies all manner of inhumanity and oppression, and that's what we see in the treatment of women in the Islamic world.
As Robert, we've got to finish very, very soon.
Yes.
As Robert Spencer brought to our attention, so he brought up a couple of different translations. I expressed in the past, one of the extra advantage of this critical Quran is having amazing footnotes. You can read any other Quran translation, go and read Sahih International, go and read other ones, but just get this book simply for the footnotes. They are amazingly helpful, and once it's under your hand, it helps the making discussions with Muslims follow much better. So please get the book, and then check out the footnotes, memorize the footnotes, even if it is necessary. Let me just say thank you for this super chat. Someone is using David's picture. Hey, no, hey, about religion is so silly. There is no logical way to attack it because it doesn't rely on a logic in any way. Yes.
I tend to think that it's good to point out how illogical and silly it is, so that people realize, because many people read the book and don't notice because they're not reading attentively. That's one of the reasons why we're doing this stream, doing a close, careful reading of the Quran. And I think if I'm not mistaken, even those of you who've read the Quran, would you not say that Hatun and I over the last few weeks have brought out a lot of things you hadn't noticed in the book? And that's the whole purpose.
And even on the screen, end of verse 32 finishes, Allah is all knowing, but we are finding difficult to get any logic from Allah.
Indeed.
Not very good. Robert Spencer, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you.
I think we will pick up from verse 35 for next week. And thank you very much, everyone who joined us in the chat. By God's grace, we will see you on another live stream.